Hi, everybody. We're going to get started with our talk tonight. So I'll do a little bit of an intro and then we will turn it over to Adrian for her presentation. So hello, I'm Judy Clem. It's nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming out. This is our second talk in our fall series. Last month, we had a bulb planting presentation that we shared, and that is to coincide with the fall mum and bulb sale that's happening at the conservatory right now. So if you haven't picked out your bulbs, and I believe there are some mums remaining, you can still come through the conservatory and shop in person or shop online. So be sure to watch for information on the bulb sale going on right now. And we're excited to share our next lecture with you, which will be coming up in October, Rising Your Garden. And so we've got Jen from the Oak Park Conservatory is going to share with us all the things that you can do to take care of your garden, put it to bed. In November, we have another native talk coming up, and that is going to be about planting with native grasses and sedges. So we really want to open your minds, starting with tonight when you think about all the shrubs, but we also want to continue the conversation so that you're thinking about ways to continue to incorporate native plants into your garden. And they're not just regular blooming, flowery type plants, but you can use grasses and sedges too to really fill in your garden. So we're excited about that. Really just want to help inspire you, right? We really want to educate you and really extend your mind to think about new things that you haven't considered in the past. So we're really happy to have you here. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. So Adrian Ayres Fisher educates about and advocates for native plant gardening, ecosystem restoration, and biodiversity. With degrees in English and education and training in botany, horticulture, and natural area restoration, she has been gardening with native plants for over 30 years. Amazing. She's a longstanding board member of West Cook Wild Ones, and she also co-chairs the Programs and Advocacy Committee for West Cook Wild Ones. She serves as a volunteer site steward of the 75-acre National Grove Woods Forest Preserve in Riverside, Illinois, where she manages the volunteer restoration projects there. Formerly, she was a state sustainability coordinator at a community college. So without further ado and rambling, we will introduce Adrian. And you can go ahead and share your screen, Adrian.
See what's going on. I think I had two talks up here. Let me just see. Here we go. All right. So actually, basically, I'm a gardener, and I've been a gardener a long time. And whoops, sorry about that. I'm a little nervous tonight. Okay. Let's just make sure I've been working on two talks this week, so I'm a little bit kerfuffled here. And so basically, I've been a gardener since somebody put some marigolds on my hand at a very young age, and I helped them plant their garden in the coach house, the house in which we lived at the time. And ever since then, I've really been drawn to just being outside and gardening, and then I got interested in what I thought of as nature, and now I understand that nature is all around us and we don't have to really go anywhere to experience it. So I've made a whole life out of it, very plant-centered life. So I'm starting with this wonderful quote from one of my favorite scientific papers that I came across about 5 years ago, called, it's actually called "What is a Shrub?" And it just encapsulates how you start to feel about shrubs as you get to know them, especially native shrubs. Shrubbiness is such a remarkable adaptive design that one may wonder why more plants have not adopted it. And it's a very good question. And in fact, all over the world, plants are adopting it, and shrub areas in the world are increasing. Some people feel that it's to some areas detriment, and in the Amazon it definitely is. However, in other areas, it's not really that bad. It's like another strategy that nature has for creating habitat, creating ecosystems, and sequestering carbon and just kind of keeping the world going. So it's very situational. Anyway, I'm going to start with sort of a story. This is the landscape of death. Now, this photo was taken by one of my favorite landscapers, Thomas Rayner. I think it was before he got the ecosystem gardening bug, and so he put this out there as an area he had landscaped. And it's the kind of landscape that I once heard someone from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources call the landscape of death. Now, why would that be? We see landscapes like this all over the place. We see them in our parks. We see them as we drive by homes. We may have them, something like this in our own home. Why? What's wrong with it? There's trees, there's grass. You see a pretty nice house in the distance. It looks like there's a little creek going through it. And it looks very green from the perspective of Google Earth, right? You see the tree canopy. And it looks very good from the perspective of a bird flying by. Let's say one of the birds that's migrating right now up the lake, down the Lake Michigan corridor. However, if that bird is migrating in the spring, it will get down to this landscape, which on human terms is perfectly nice. I mean, you could just imagine spreading a picnic blanket right there under the trees. And it's problematic. And if we were a live audience, and I could even take a live audience, why is it problematic? Basically because there's no resources that birds can feel comfortable with. Birds need food, they need shelter, they need places where they can not only forage for insects, but they often need berries and other plant materials that they can eat. And none of that is here. Birds do use trees, of course, but this landscape is really devoid of what we would call higher order ecological relationships. And what that means is when 3 or more species have relationships across species boundaries, maybe up and down the trophic levels. It goes in all kinds of different ways. That's why we call it the food web, for example. And so what you're missing in this landscape are the components that would make it a fully functioning ecological landscape. And you could start by saying shrubs. I would add grasses and sedges. I would also include forbs or flowers and maybe some vines. Because then you're starting to fill up the landscape in a way that every kind of creature, including humans, can feel comfortable. So what is a shrub? Well, you know it when you see it. Anybody who says, oh yeah, the one on the A is obviously a shrub. B, it could be an elm tree maybe, or C, I'm not sure what that would be, maybe a honey locust, but then D is getting a little bit, it's got a few trunks, it's kind of in between. And that's the kind of interesting thing about shrubs, is they can go from very, very small, maybe a foot tall, up to being nearly trees, understory trees. And there's some large shrubs that it's kind of hard to say, are they shrubs or are they trees? So the technical description is it is a woody plant with several perennial stems that may be erect or may lay close to the ground. And it will usually have a height less than 13 feet and stems no more than about 3 inches in diameter. However, that's a little bit fuzzy. Anyone who has an acquaintance with a large lilac, for example, which may get up to 20 feet, and the stems, unless you do renewal pruning every once in a while, can get very large indeed. But in general, this is kind of a flexible description, and it's close enough. And I always like to start with definitions because, you know, it's just nice to know where you stand. So shrubs in the historical landscape occupied a lot of different niches. And this is a schematic of the Illinois landscape that was around in before settlement and even into settlement. And it's a mosaic. If we didn't have the houses around here and we just had the small villages and native camps and a few farms, the landscape would be it would gradually move from being a prairie with practically no trees, except every once in a while maybe a bur oak or maybe some wild plum along a creek or something like that, to a savanna, which is a very human-suited kind of landscape. The trees are would be wide enough to, as they would say, ride a wagon through with a team of horses. So it wasn't very enclosed, and there were all kinds of interesting shrubs and plants growing in there. And oh, by the way, there's shrubs in the prairie too, which I'll get to in a little while. And so shrubs are a very important part of savannas, along with the widely spaced trees. And then you get into woodlands, and that's the kind of place that I am working on restoring right now. National Grove is technically a floodplain woodland and forest. And so it goes from woodland, which is kind of, you're in a woods, but you don't feel closed off. And then you gradually get into forest where, as they say, you can't see the forest for the trees because there's just so many trees. Illinois, especially in the Chicago wilderness region, where we are, not much forest. Honestly, if there is forest, it is usually an area in which many, many trees have grown and it was not managed with fire. All of these are fire adapted landscapes, and they help keep them being what they are. The fire keeps trees out of the prairie, it keeps savannas open, and it keeps woodlands from becoming forests. And because you need to have light coming down through the canopy so that the flowers and bushes and sedges and grasses can all grow. So this is a little bit what it might have looked like. And some of our forest preserves still do. There's almost 70,000 acres in Cook County of forest preserve. And this is not Cook County, actually. I'm cheating. It's southeast Wisconsin. But you can see how the landscape kind of moves from really open area to some taller grasses to some shrubs, and in the background you see the line of trees. And if you go to Palos, if you go to a lot of, or maybe Sundown, some of our bigger preserves, you will see a landscape like this. And this is what all of Northern Illinois was like at one time. And there was plenty of room for shrubs to spread out and for trees to propagate themselves and for flowers to bloom. And it was pretty ecologically balanced. It was also very wet because there were no drain pipes or French drains or anything else that farmers rely on to dry out the fields enough so that they can grow corn and soy. So it was just quite different. And people wrote remarkable things about it when the settlers came in the 19th century. So wherever you are in Northern Illinois and in the preserves, I guess you would say the ideal landscape would probably more or less, more or fewer trees, and definitely an understory of shrubs. And that's something that we've kind of lost sight of when we're doing our home landscaping. Yeah, we have some shrubs around our houses, but a lot of times, although this is changing, we don't think about incorporating shrubs into our gardens as an integral part, beyond being maybe a background. So what do shrubs do? They add really important structure, as I was talking about, in the landscape of death. You have the canopy layer, which is the big old trees. You've got the subcanopy, which is the understory trees. And those are those really pretty blooming trees that we like so much, like, the blooming dogwoods or the red bud trees or the other ones that frequently look so nice, the service berries, they look so nice in the spring. And then below that, you have the shrub layer. And then you have the ground layer below that. So you've got the shrubs kind of winding in and out. They can form groves, they can form clumps, they can be situated individually. And then you also have vines going up into the trees frequently. And then you have the ground layer, which is the flowers and the sedges and the grasses. And then underneath the ground, of course, you have the entire underground microbiome, which is and the roots, which are as important as what you see above. And all kinds of animals make use of this kind of structure. Any day you might see robins on the ground pecking through things, or cardinals. You might see a hawk up in the canopy. At National Grove, there's a Cooper's hawk is often seen, and we have some red-shouldered hawks that are very adapted to flying through tree areas. And then all the songbirds, and you've got, of course, you've got deer, you've got coyotes, and they all make use of this landscape. And so do the herps, so do the turtles, and so do the toads and the bees, just everything. And they're much more comfortable in this kind of a landscape because the trees offer shelter. They offer perching places. All of the plants offer food of one sort of another, and if they don't offer food, they offer cover. They have a place to nest. They offer. The older trees might have holes where squirrels might live. It's just a wonderful thing. And then that's when you get your higher level ecological relationships. So what do we need? Fertile flowers, nectar and pollen for pollinators, host plants for butterflies. A lot of butterflies, the monarch beside, a lot of butterflies use trees and shrubs as their host plants for their caterpillars, and that's where they lay their eggs. And so if you don't have certain kinds of shrubs, you're not going to have certain kinds of butterflies. Berries, drupes, and nuts for birds and other animals. If you want to have fun going down a rabbit hole, look up the difference between berries, drupes, and nuts sometimes. There's some very surprising facts about what is a berry, what is a drupe, and what is a nut. And I won't go down that rabbit hole. Shelter, as I said, for perching and nesting. Food and shelter for the soil critters. Shrub roots are really important in the rhizosphere, which is the area around their roots underground. So I want to talk about conventional landscaping a little bit, because I've just been talking about ecological complexity. And complexity is what nature does really well. Nature does complexity so well that every time we learn something new about it, it's often hard won, and it's often exciting, and it often leads to yet more questions and more wondering and oh no, now I thought I understood, but now I don't. And what we do with conventional landscaping is we simplify. And when we're using shrubs, we use horticultural varieties. And sometimes we like to put shrubs, like this row of boxwood over here, in just a line. And then we like to have mulch with no understory, just sort of bare mulch. And then we like to have grass that's kind of manicured within an inch of its life. Or we like to have a shrub assortment. There's a few barberries in there. This might be some kind of sumac, but I'm not sure. And on, a conifer. And a lot of people think that this looks nice. It's tidy, it's manicured. It requires a certain type of upkeep. I think these kinds of landscapes were actually, especially came into being when people started getting power tools, and horticulturalists bred plants to stay put, to respond well to shearing, to respond well to power gardening tools. And it enables, of course, crews to just come in and, as we say, mow, blow, and grow. And then in the spring, they chop all the bushes down to some kind of round shape. And there you are, you're landscaped for the summer. As you can see, this is not my favorite kind of landscaping, but it's been pretty prevalent. It's been dominant for, I don't know what, 100 years? Well, it was getting into it in the 20s, and they had beautification programs that were trying to get people to neaten up their yards, and then it continued on from there. And then fertilizer and pesticide companies got into it, and so now we have the kind of, I don't know what you would call it, industrial landscaping? Yeah, you could call it that. Anyway, but now people are getting away from that, which is really, really exciting. When I started gardening 30 years ago, I was really lonely and I had a hard time finding native plants. And I fondly remember running into Art Gora, some of you knew him, at the farmer's market, and he sold me some native plants, and I was hooked, and on I went. But it took a long time to find other people, and it's really in the last 5 or 10 years that I've really been seeing a big difference, especially here in. So I'm going to talk about a few problems, and then we're going to get into some lovely shrubs. Most of you know about the problem of buckthorn and Japanese or Eurasian honeysuckle. They are actually illegal in Illinois. So if you have buckthorn or honeysuckle in your yard, you are breaking the law, just so you know. Cut it down, get rid of it, get something else. I know it's easier said than done, but that's my advice. The problem with them is that they are terribly invasive. They come in, they leaf out early, they stay leafed out late, they make it very difficult for all of the native flowers and sedges and grasses to grow. Buckthorn literally changes the chemical composition of the ground in which it grows. It changes the proportion of nitrogen and I think, let me think about this, oxygen, so that it makes it even more difficult. It's not really allelopathic chemicals, but it just changes the chemical composition enough that the natives, which are used to a different kind of a leaner soil, aren't going to be as happy. And that rhizosphere I was talking about, when studies are done of buckthorn roots, the microbes and the fungi that live in those roots are quite different from the surrounding area. So buckthorn can really create a lot of havoc. And it looks small here, but it can grow 25, 30 feet tall. Its trunks can be as far across as your hand. And we spend a lot of time in the forest preserves getting rid of it. And honeysuckle is a little bit different. It's more shrubby and a little less woody, I guess you would say, but it also grows quite tall and is quite proliferous and has many of the same invasive qualities. Now, the other thing to realize is that both buckthorn and honeysuckle have berries. And these berries are not nutritious for birds. Now, birds will eat them because they have to. And I've seen deer grazing on honeysuckle berries. I've seen them reaching up really high to get the berries on honeysuckle. But of course, both, birds and deer, they eat them and then they poop them out, and then we get more honeysuckle and more buckthorn. And the other interesting thing about buckthorn is they say, well, take out the females first. But buckthorn has the interesting quality of being able to change its sex, and it can become female. And I looked into this one time because we were trying to deal with a buckthorn grove, and it just seemed like there were so many females. I mean, way more, and they're the ones that produce the berries. And so it's like a strategy to increase, increase its territory. And the other thing about these berries, most native berries will have, say, anywhere up to 50% fat, and they have protein, which the birds need if they are nesting, if they're migrating. They use a lot of energy in those little bodies. Whereas these kinds of berries, I don't know how they feed the birds in the countries from which they came, but they might have 0.7% fat, 0.2% fat, which is not good for the birds. They're just not nutritious. It's like eating sugared frosted flakes or something. Not good for you. And then the buckthorn also has its Rhamnus catharticus, and it will make the birds have basically tummy aches and gastrointestinal problems. So they're shrubs that are appropriate in the lands where they came from. I've been in England where buckthorn is just growing in hedgerows. Nobody worries about it. And so it's really kind of too bad, because they're actually kind of nice shrubs. They just don't behave very well. Two shrubs that are not regulated in Illinois, but that lots of people have, are barberry and burning bush. And everybody really likes them. Barberry can be green or it can be red. There's a lot of different cultivars. And there is currently a push to have it be a listed plant because it is so invasive that the stewards and the forest preserves spend hours and hours and hours and hours cutting out barberry just so other plants can have a chance to grow. And burning bush is kind of the same way. It's just very, very prolific. And again, here's those berries. I recently moved, and I inherited a 15-foot tall burning bush, which I'm hacking at and hacking at and hacking at. I'm finally going to get rid of it, but it's the same story. Non-nutritious berries help, and birds eat them. They get spread everywhere, and there's all kinds of things you could plant instead. You could plant a native burning bush. You could plant a black haw viburnum. They turn red in the fall. You could plant dwarf fothergilla. There's all kinds of nice things you could plant instead. You don't have to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. This picture is actually from Schroeder's greenhouses out in Aurora. They have like 5-6 different varieties of barberry. And I personally think that I hope nobody's working for the horticulture or nursery industry right now that I'm talking to, but I'd say it anyway. I think that nurseries could be a lot more responsible about what it is they sell. There's a lot of room for improvement. They don't have to keep selling Bradford pears, for example, now that they've been shown to be such an invasive tree, and they don't have to keep selling barberries and burning bushes. There's all kinds of other bushes, native bushes they could be selling. So let's say you want to incorporate some shrubs into your garden. And what I did when I was starting out was I didn't know about shrubs. Okay, so I was just planting, I was planting prairie coneflower, I was planting cup plant, I was planting prairie dropseed grass, it's all this stuff. And then I got the the shrub message. So then I was trying to cram shrubs in wherever I could. And my garden was really nice, but it was really a mess. So I think a plan really helps. I got this from a little pamphlet I got from IDNR one time, and it shows your fairly ordinary suburban house, maybe a slightly bigger plot than we might have in Oak Park. Um, but it does have a pretty typical kind of landscaping, a couple of trees, a tiny flower garden, some shrubs. And so the best thing to do is to, what do you have? Then start filling in. Where do you have room for some shrubs? Where do you have room for another tree? Or more trees? Where do you want to put a bird bath? Where do you want to put your native prairie garden? And how do you want to make it to be a home for yourself as well as a home for other animals, other species? And there's all kinds of ways you can do it, but you can make a really simple plan just on a piece of notebook paper. I mean, I don't know, that's what I did for years. The wise thing to do, if at all possible, if you are starting a new bed, if you're going to do some new plantings along a fence, is to think about where the shrubs are going to go first. How big are they going to grow? What do you want to put with them? I'm not in favor of myself of just having a few shrubs and then mulch and then nothing else, even though that's what a lot of people do. And so you make a little plan, and maybe it takes you a few years to fill it in, but you start with the shrubs. I actually did that this spring. When we moved last summer, and then this spring I put in maybe 10 bare root little tiny baby shrubs that are now growing, and then this year I started last year doing that, and then this year I finally started putting in some flowers and some sedges. And what I really like to do is put the shrubs first, shrubs and trees first, then put in the sedges, like make a matrix of sedges. And then after you've done that, or at the same time you're doing that, then you can put in your flowers also. People, a lot of times they start with the flowers and then they don't have the structure that they might really actually want. The other point I want to make is about rain gardens, especially in Oak Park. I've talked to so many people that have had rain gardens put in, and they have literally stopped their basements from flooding. And I've never needed one, but I cannot recommend them highly enough. And these are two very nice plans that I was browsing around one day a couple years ago, and they were put out by Audubon because they're so bird friendly. And they, as you can see, those big round circles, they've got trees, they've got shrubs, it's a really nice list. They've got shrubby St. John's wort and gray dogwood and buttonbush, and that's just all kinds of woody plants that can take wet soil and that help give structure to the rain garden. So rain garden doesn't have to only be prairie plants. And then in the partial sun and shade one, they've got silky dogwood, another kind of dogwood, pagoda dogwood, bladdernut, some of my favorite shrubs, redbud, arrowwood viburnum. Those I've grown all those, and it's nice to think about, because in Oak Park I know very few people that have so much sun that they can't grow shade or part shade plants. Oak Park mostly is really more like a savanna for the most part. And here's a rain garden in Oak Park. These people were in the West Cook Wild Ones garden walk a couple of years ago. And when we were talking to them, they were some of the ones, they said that once they put this rain garden in, it was actually two neighbors kind of worked on a couple of rain gardens between their houses. It literally stopped the flooding. They couldn't believe what a good job it did. So I highly recommend that as kind of way to improve the ecosystem, have a beautiful garden, and do some what they call green infrastructure as well. If you've got a big area, like let's say you have a farm up in Michigan, something like that. This is where native shrubs come into their glory, because so many native shrubs have a tendency to sucker, to expand, because if you think about the historic landscape and the size of the prairies, there are accounts of people driving through the prairies and they'd see nothing but, oh, cup plant, the flowers, certain kinds of flowers for yards and yards and yards. And then they might see literally a quarter mile of gray dogwood or a huge patch of sumac. And these plants were made, the prairies were so big and the landscape was so big that there really was room for these shrubs and other plants to really fulfill their nature. And nobody said, "Oh my goodness, there's too many dogwood, or there's too many sumac, or there's too many this or that," because it was just part of the landscape, and it was a big patchwork of different kinds of plants. And you sometimes see that a little bit when you go to some big prairies, but it's something to consider. I mean, if you have a big property. Another question people have about native shrubs is, are cultivars okay? Now, there's a big discussion when you're talking about forbs, because maybe they've been bred for brighter flower color, and then they're not as attractive to pollinators because the cues that the pollinators use change, or there's no scent, scentless roses or something like that. Shrubs are a little bit different, but one really good example that I can think of is our native hydrangea, which is Hydrangea arborescens. And this is Annabelle, which is a very, very, very popular old variety. It's a cultivar. And it is lacking, it looks really pretty and it's white, but it's lacking the really little tiny flowers that the pollinators use. So on the right is the straight species. You see how lacy it is. You see how I was able to catch a little bee on it. And now the interesting thing is, I was just reading a report from the Mount Cuba Center that breeders are now trying to make cultivars that they feel would behave better in the garden, wouldn't be quite so leggy, or wouldn't be so tall, or whatever they would want. But they're also focusing on keeping the desirability for pollinators. And I think that's really great progress, because it wasn't something that was on many horticulturalists' radar even a few years ago. And now they're really consciously trying to breed cultivars in an ecological way. So look out for that. All you have to do is Google like Mount Cuba hydrangea cultivars, and it'll pop up different articles and stuff if you're interested. So that's something to know about. And there's other shrubs too, which we'll get to, that you have to be, what you're going to get is the cultivar if you're going through nurseries, but at least they're native. Okay, so as we saw, we don't want to get Asian honeysuckle. These are the non-natives. Boxwood, the ones with the asterisks are the really bad guys. I didn't talk about privet, but that's another one that's just scary. Some of these are like Eurasian viburnums, like your Viburnum carlii, the Korean spice viburnum they're not invasive. They're not doing anything. If you got them in your garden, they smell good. Pollinators do use them. Okay, don't get rid of them. It's really these 1, 2, 3, 4, these 5 that are really not so, that you just don't want to have. Lilacs never hurt anybody. The non-native hydrangeas. Well, what I'm calling non-native. It's also the cultivars that don't include the actual pollen and nectar producing flowers. But there's so many great native shrubs that you can put in your garden. It's really exciting. Some of them are larger, some of them are a little bit, you have to know how to handle them because they might sucker a lot. And if you don't want to manage them, then maybe that's not the right shrub for you. But the American black currant, the hazelnut makes these really funny shaped flowers, and then these nuts that the squirrels just go crazy for. Any American viburnum, especially the black haw and the nannyberry, have beautiful white flowers. Oh, and arrowwood too. They have beautiful white flowers. They have, I guess they're berries. I'm not sure if they're berries or drupes, but anyway, they're very attractive and very nutritious for the birds. And some of them you can eat. You can eat black haw viburnum berries, but you might not get them. Bladder nuts make beautiful little flowers and little sort of bladder shaped things. And some they'll grow. They're getting into sort of sub tree kind of understory tree shape size, and so are the wafer ash. Virginia sweetspire. Usually, what you'll get is Little Henry's garnet, but it seems to be a sweet bush, and it has really nice color in the fall if you want to get rid of your burning bush. One of my favorites is St. John's wort, indigo bush, elderberry. These are all just really great, and all of them have a place in somebody's yard. It might be you might get a smaller one, a dwarf bothered gilla if you only have a small corner. But if you have room to spread out, then don't get a 9-bark cultivar. Get a regular 9-bark. They'll grow 10 feet tall, and they're really really great. Okay, so these are some of the shrubs that I was talking about and that actually are being sold right now. Not all of them are being sold by West Cook Wild Ones, but quite a few of them are. And I vouch for all of them. Pagoda dogwood, again, that can become almost tree size, not like a big tree, but like 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall. And it has a beautiful shape and beautiful, the branches go out, well, like a pagoda, they go out laterally. So it's an unusual dogwood. Fragrant sumac, I don't have a lot of experience with, but other people tell me that it's really a nice shrub. Black haw viburnum, well, I love those so much. They grow in Thatcher Woods, actually. And I have, I put 2 in the back of my yard, and I'm really anxious to see how they look when they grow. Snowberry is a funny shrub. It maybe grows 3 to 6 feet tall. It's kind of round. It has these really pretty pink flowers, and in the winter it has fat white berries that just kind of stay on the shrub. And it makes small colonies, but it's not going to take over your garden. You just have to site it and then understand that it's going to make a little patch. Red twig dogwood, probably everyone knows what that is because that's been sold in horticultural in the nurseries forever. And it has those beautiful red twigs that come out. And I don't know why this one doesn't have red twigs, but anyway, it's very striking in winter, especially. American elderberry, I've been noticing, is getting a little bit of popularity in Oak Park. And it, again, has really nice white flowers. It has the purple berries. Pollinators love it. Short-tongued bees. It's got these kind of shallow flowers, so it attracts particular kinds of pollinators. And if you go to Columbus Park, by the lagoon, they've got some elderberries. American black currant that's a really neat shrub. It grows about 4 feet tall. It can take some moisture. It does sort of like to expand a little bit. You really only need one. It makes these pretty little yellow bells that bumblebees really like. They kind of stick their little heads into the bellflowers and get their nectar and pollen. I was talking about bladdernut and its little bell-like flowers that are attractive to different bees. And of course, all of these provide structure and for the birds. I've actually, oh, and chokeberry, which attracts its own kind of andrena bees in the spring, but then the birds, it's interesting. Chokeberry can take it likes sun, it likes a slightly more damp spot. It grows about, it can grow up to 8 feet tall, but it doesn't always. There's a cultivar that came from Morton Arboretum that's a really good shrub, and it doesn't spread as much as the straight species. But I've seen the berries tend to hang on into the fall, and then when there's a freeze, I guess they taste a little better. And I've seen robins actually with their adolescent progeny, the adolescent progeny is hopping behind the robin, opening its mouth, and then the robin will be feeding it chokeberries, pulling them off and feeding it to them. So it's pretty funny. It's pretty entertaining to watch. And then I have to have a shout out for, I should stop soon. Shrubby St. John's wort, which loves sun, can take a little slightly drier area. It grows about 3-4 feet tall. You trim it back in the spring, and it makes these bright yellow flowers that release pollen until noon. And so I used to have some in my old house, and I'd sit on my back porch and you just hear buzz, 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 because every bumblebee in the neighborhood was coming to the Shrubby St. John's wort to get that pollen, because pollen is something that bees don't get enough of. They are very limited by their pollen resources. And so if you can plant shrubs that offer pollen, and two of the best are native roses and Shrubby St. John's wort, you are doing the native bees a really big favor, because they just, it's habitat. One reason we have so much wildlife decline is just decline of habitat. And it's so easy to provide habitat. It really is. It's not hard at all. Native roses, you have to be kind of careful with them. This is a swamp rose. And I had it, as you can see, by the rain barrel, and it got a lot of water. And I planted some Carex grayi, which is wetland sedge, under it, and some Pachyra aurea, which is another kind of wetland plant. And it again, the bees, it releases its pollen in the morning, and that's when the bees come, before noon. And they can tell with both these plants. The bees can tell. I don't know if these particular flowers release a scent pheromone that tells the bees that they don't have pollen anymore, or if it's the scent of other insects having been on the flowers. There's different ways that the insects can tell that the plants are done serving up their pollen for the day. But both of these are really great. But the thing about native roses is they really want to expand. And this swamp rose, it was surrounded on 4 sides. My husband had dug out a big chunk of concrete. And so we stuck the swamp rose in there, and it grew really well, but it wasn't going to escape. And another friend of mine has one in the alley, and it's huge, but it's just in a spot in an alley next to a fence where it's not going to really invade the flower beds or anything like that. And my brother had one I gave to him in a corner where it reliably flooded every spring. There was runoff from his neighbors' yards. And so what he would do is just mow around it. They're a little more contained. Well, in the wild, where they have the room and there's more competition, they're not quite as aggressive. But you kind of have to be careful with native roses. And the same thing for Rosa satigera and Rosa blanda. You want to just cite them very, very carefully. I put some Rosa, is it Carolina? Anyway, I put it in a bed, but I have it surrounded by other kind of aggressive plants, and it should be okay. Oh, and this is a little video. That was last spring. Just to give us something to think about. So regenerative landscaping, which is what I call it, or regenerative gardening, is just creating an ecological framework for you and all of the other species that you share your life with and your land with. And so that's pretty much it. I've got some books. These, if you want to take a screenshot, these are some of my favorite books. They are really good, and I've learned a lot from all of them. A lot of what I've told you is from these books. And here's my advertisement. We're having a Wild Ones native tree and shrub sale. We actually extended it. So if you want to order a shrub, you can until the 27th, and pickup will be October 5th. And you can go to the Wild Ones website, or you can go to Wild Ones West Cook, my Shopify. And here you could take another screenshot if you want. These are great online resources. Chicago Botanic Garden actually has they have a plant this, not that. At least they used to. I don't know if they do anymore, or you might have to look for it. Forest Preserves of Cook County, just in case you want to get out and do some volunteer work. Doug Tallamy, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, has Homegrown National Park. Illinois Wildflowers has, that guy, John Hilty, has never let me down yet. You can look up pretty much any plant, shrub, flower, sedge, grass, and he will, he's got pictures how they grow, and it's really very convenient, and so on. And you go to National Wild Ones, West Cook Wild Ones. Oh, and we have a YouTube channel, and we post our monthly talks on the YouTube channel. There's where to buy native plants. Prairie Moon, Prairie Nursery, a really great mail order possibility place. You have to go down and get them, but that's where our shrubs come from at our plant sales. So that's, you don't have to go down to Moline and pick them up. You can get them. So thank you. And that's my old house with my little service berry in front of it that was so beautiful in the spring.
Looks good.
So,
okay. Thanks
so I
so
ran
much.
a little long. I apologize. I'm just.
Yeah. Casey, how are our questions looking? Do we have some other than mine that we want to ask?
Yeah, there's just one other in addition
go
to
ahead.
yours.
Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, we'll start with the other one and then we'll circle back to yours, Judy, then. So, and we have one question from Rebecca, and she asks, you had that slide of 9 different shrubs with the pictures, and she's asking which of those are good for shade of a large parkway or under large parkway trees.
Oh boy, I have to go back and look at them. I do. If I pull that slide up, I can do that. Let's see. I'll have to go back through it. No, what happened? That's not working. Let me try again. I don't know what's happening with this. It's not coming up. I'm sorry. It went away. Why would that do that, Julie?
You might have to push the back arrow button because you were at the end of your presentation. But see if you can do it from your computer without sharing first to get to the screen. See that back arrow button
Right there?
at the bottom,
Okay.
bottom left.
Yeah, I see it.
There you go.
Ah, there I go. Thank you so much. I've never been in this situation before. Now what happened to it? Oh well, this is taking too much time. Okay. I can just off the top of my head, I can say that most of the shrubs, it would depend on what kind of parkway trees they are. And you'd want to choose some smaller ones because it is a parkway. So maybe a dwarf fothergilla might work. Some of the smaller cultivars of 9-bark, for example, some other shrubs like that. They would be listed as suitable for part shade. Hydrangeas are pretty much Oak Park's official bush shrub. Pretty much everyone has hydrangeas, but some might be suitable for a parkway. Somebody across the street from me actually has some hydrangeas on the park.
I can clarify the question a little bit. So it's not that I want to plant under the parkway tree, it's the parkway tree is so large that it shadows my front lawn.
Okay. And what kind of a tree is it?
This one is a hackberry.
It's a hackberry. Oh, that's a fabulous tree. Yeah. Well, I know people think it's messy, and but there was just an article in the New York Times about hackberries and how lovely they are. But that's actually, it shadows, but it's got pretty small leaves, so you should be good with some hydrangeas or some. Laura put in the chat. What is it? What did she say? Dwarf native honeysuckle. That's a really good one. Although that likes a little bit more sun. And what are some other ones? Oh, ones I just named would all work pretty well. And as I said, hydrangeas would work pretty well too. Are you going to put it by your house or like out towards the edge of your yard, or?
I'm not sure yet, just anything other than grass.
Yeah, right.
Which also does not grow beneath the hackberry, but it's pretty much shade all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, so that would, it is possible, but it would take a little bit of research. I don't think I could just sit here and say, this is the shrub that you need to put in.
Mhm.
I can say, don't put in shrubby St. John's wort. But you might be able to get away with some, I don't know, I'm blanking on what they would be, but the most of the shrubs that like shade in the woods tend to get to be a bit taller, like the bladdernuts can be 10 or 12 feet tall. And so you might want to investigate, do a little research before you decide. But the West Cook Wild Ones descriptions on the sale site will clearly state what kinds of conditions that these shrubs are appropriate for. Actually, American black currant is also pretty good for parchment. Okay.
Mine's huge.
Yours is huge?
My black currant, yeah.
Yeah.
It's massive, yeah. And I planted 2 side by side,
Yeah.
which I should never have done.
Yeah.
So I moved one to the
How
front.
tall? Yeah. How tall are they?
I mean, probably like 5 or 6 feet wide, and maybe 5.5 feet tall.
Ah, okay. Yeah. They respond to pruning.
Okay, that's part of what my question was, but let's go to Katie's question, Casey.
All right.
Sure. So Katie is asking, when is the best time to transplant some native shrubs that are several years old?
Spring. Yeah. Early spring before they get too far, going too much. Now, there are some caveats. If a shrub, some of the early spring blooming shrubs, you may prefer to move in the early fall as they're going down a little bit. Like normally, this time of year would be really great. Early October would be really great. We're having a little bit of rain problems, so if you do transplant a shrub right now, just make sure you keep it really hydrated. Yeah, like right now you could do it. Well, in a week or two.
What are the shrubs, Katie? What are you transplanting?
I've got several that I really didn't put in the best spots. St. John's wort for sure is one of them. I think a coralberry or chokeberry. I'm not sure. I have to go look at the notes. They're just not in the spots that I think I should have them in. So
Oh, okay.
but they're not
Yeah,
real big right now. They're just, I've gotten them from wild ones and they're probably, from the last couple of years or so.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm gonna be moving some I'm gonna be moving some St. John's wort because I put it in a place where it's not quite sunny enough. So I'm gonna be moving them, and I'll be moving them in the spring. What I will do is right around the time they're just barely starting to leaf out, I will trim them by about a third, and then I'll dig them up and move them over to a sunnier spot.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, Laura's saying gooseberry. Yes.
And then we just got another question in the chat from Erin. So she is asking, or she says, I planted some chokeberries in June and not sure how much supplemental watering they need during the drought. Should they be well established by now?
Shrubs, young shrubs really need water for about their first year. And so I would say no, they're not well established yet. You could give them a really good drink about once a week, and it will just set them up for next year a lot better. And you can keep doing that until it gets freezing cold out. And yeah, I mean, not quite into snowy times, but definitely through the fall, shrubs do benefit by some extra water.
You want to go to my question, or should I just ask it?
Yeah, Judy, go ahead.
Jumped in. So we have St. John's wort, which I've loved, but it's probably 5 to 8 years old at the Temple Garden.
Mhm.
I just wonder, like, should we be pruning it to get it under control? Because it's pretty big, and or does it need to be divided? I've never really divided a shrub. I don't think that's a thing.
No, that's not really a thing. You can some shrubs like American blackcurrant, for example, they will bend their branches down and they will reroot, and then you can, after they've grown roots, you can cut the branch and replant that piece.
Okay.
So a lot of shrubs do that. The shrubby St. John's wort, if you examine it, it gets very woody at the bottom, and usually what's good to do is cut them back every year by about a third, and just shape them. You can just shape them.
Okay.
And do it when their leaves are just coming out, before they even think about making flowers.
Okay.
Because they make flowers on new wood, so it's it's just a nice thing to do, and that way you can keep them under control.
Okay. So earlier in spring for the St. John's wort, and then the black currant. When am I pruning that? Because it's probably overgrown by now.
Yeah, well, let's see. I am not very polite to my black currants.
Okay.
I just cut them back whenever I think they need to be cut back, and you can look at like the older canes. You can just cut them out, and then if there's too many, they're lying on the ground, and you can see that they're going to start just making new shrubs. You just cut them. I mean, I mean, I wouldn't say, like give them a crew cut, but you can be judiciously kind of take them back a little
bit. Are there any more questions? Because I have another one that I can ask while I have you. Is ironweed a shrub?
Ironweed? No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a form.
Okay. Because it looks like a shrub now on my parkway, because it's been going for such a long time. So I just wasn't sure if I defined it as the right thing or not. But yeah, okay.
Some of those great big plants can be very, very shrubby. I mean,
yeah.
Joe Pye can be very, very shrubby.
Yes, and tall. So any other questions, guys? You can just unmute.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a very general knowledge, possibly silly question, but is there a difference between a shrub and a bush?
No,
Okay.
some people, no, there's an old joke about the one of our former presidents about he was the shrub and his dad was the bush.
Oh,
But
that's cute.
but no, there's really not. I think they may have they come from two different languages or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Great. Well, this was so nice. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And I am just waiting for this drought to kind of be undroughty. I mean, I think there's some rain on the horizon in the next few days, but it has been such a long stretch, and it's really been challenging to just take care of the garden as much as we have. But I just want to thank you, Adrian, for taking the time to do this presentation for us. It was very, very interesting. And now I'm just dreaming about what else I can put in my garden. So thank you for joining us, everybody. And feel free to ask any other final questions while we're still here, or wave at us.